Hello, ladies, and welcome to episode 2 of our online Witchcraft Academy. So if the first episode didn't put you off, then you're here for the second. Today, we're going to be talking about and learning about the sun and the moon. And they have a very, very big impact on us as witches. We work with them all the time. And you all know that we do the Sabbath days and we do those days of magic. But I don't know if all of you actually know what we're celebrating and why we do this. And so because we're covering the basics, we're going to go right back to why we're celebrating those days, what they're all about. We're also going to look at the moon. So the moon is an integral part of our magical workings. And we're all water, so it deeply affects us. So we're going to look at the moon as well. And as witches, when we looked at last month, what is a witch? Well, it's not anything sinister, is it? It's people who are connected to the earth, to nature, and we're harnessing those powers of energy and of nature. So when we directly harness that power of nature, we do that very often by the sun and the moon. And really, they're integral to all life. They are the balance. They are the hieros gamos of nature, the sun and the moon. The sun representing the masculine, the moon, the feminine. The light, the dark, the gold, the silver. Balance between the masculine and feminine. And so they have a massive effect on us. And we're going to look first at the sun. So the sun obviously affects everything in life on earth. We need the light from the sun to survive. If you plant a seed in the earth, it strives and grows for the sun. I was in the forest the other day and there were fallen trees that should have died by all rights, but they didn't. And they grew in a different way and they twisted and they turned. And it was the funniest looking tree. I actually took a photograph of it because it was just striving for the light and it carried on living. So everything strives for the light. The light affects us. And the waning of the light, when the light dims, affects us. It affects our cycles. It affects our energy. And it affects our magical practices. Quite a few of you have been to our Sabbath days, and we've recently had Beltane and celebrated May Day and the huge maypole in the centre of the academy and the vagina log that we all delved into and gave a little pleasure to as we took our crystals. So we've looked at this. We even looked at it in last month's Coven, and we did our hieros gamos magic, our banishing and invoking magic. And so we're going to look at that in a little bit more detail and how we work with the sun and the moon, the seasons and the cycles. And as women, we're cyclical. We move with the moon. And one of the books on this month's recommendation list is Self-Sorcery by my favourite author, Lisa Lister, who was the lady who wrote the witch book that we talked about last time. So in there, and in her other great book, not a great title, mind, Love Your Lady Landscape, she talks a lot about women as cyclical beings, as our periods, our menstrual cycle, and how that's the same as the moon cycle. But also she talks about how we're actually a different archetype depending on where we are in that cycle. Now, I'm pretty much coming to the end of my cycles and moving into my croning phase, into my menopause. I'm in the menopause, so I won't be having those cycles forever. But we still, even when we're not bleeding, we're still going through cycles. We are still cyclical beings. We're water and we're affected by the moon. So the moon cycle, the 28-day cycle, is very important to us as women and as witches. And the bigger picture of that is the sun cycle, which is the cycle of the year, us evolving and moving through the seasons, the 4 seasons, and celebrating those seasons, working with those seasons. So it's a really important part of us as women and as witches that we connect with the celestial beings that are in our sky. So I wanted to look first at the Wheel of the Year. And the Wheel of the Year, so I'm going to show you a Wheel of the Year. This is the one off my altar. So we have got some of these at the Academy. And you can see, hopefully you can see, all around that wheel, different dates and celebrations. And basically that wheel is split into different celebrations as we move through the cycles of the year. And why is that important? Because we're harnessing the energy of nature. We're working with the energy of nature. If we're in our kitchen witch phase, we are gathering plants, we are gathering seeds, we are planting seeds, we are working with the energies of life. And anyone that's a gardener will know it's May, so everybody's we're in the garden. And when it's in December, we're not planting. So it's very relevant to us as women and as witches. But the ancient ways of harnessing and working with the natural magic of the earth were done through the wheel of the year. Spiritual wisdom can be gained by recognizing the traditions of the old witchcraft and the connection to the seasons. When we sleep, when we wake, or the animals hibernating, it's a cycle, like our monthly cycle. This is a yearly cycle. And as witches, we celebrate that cycle, we work with that cycle, and we harness the energy of that cycle. So the sun moves us through the seasons, and we're all quite familiar with spring and summer and autumn and winter. And within those cycles, there are other cycles. So there are actually 8 celebrations throughout the year. There's there's the solstices, there's the equinoxes, and then there's another. In between all of those, there's another celebration, all celebrating different parts of the year and different aspects of the witch, different energies. So just as we look at the moon in a second, we're going to learn about banishing and invoking, and it's a very simple cycle with the moon. But really the 2 cycles are the same. They're moving through the dark and the light, the invoking and the banishing, the celebration and the sorrow. They're moving through cycles like we move through the cycle of life. So when we look at the wheel of the year, we start at the beginning of the year. So we start with Imbolc on the 1st of February, and we move through the year. Most people are quite familiar with the solstices, with the summer solstice on June the 21st, and the winter solstice, Yule, which obviously is now Christmas, in December. And then the equinoxes, spring equinox and the autumn equinox. And many people, like Ostara that we celebrate, is Easter. It's celebrated in March. It's actually, Ostara is my favourite. It's on my birthday, the 20th of March. And that is the spring equinox. It's the first day of spring. So even as far as weather is concerned, the 21st of March is officially the first day of spring. So it's celebrating those. And then in between those, there are other celebrations. So I want to tell you about those celebrations as we move through the year and why we're celebrating them, really, what they are a celebration of. So we move through the solstices, the equinoxes, and then the other celebrations in between. So we start with Imbolc. Now, these names are quite difficult to pronounce. And if you hear people talking about these, they often pronounce them in different ways. So Imbolc is a funny word, isn't it? And it's spelled Imbolc. And it's often pronounced Imbolg with it sounds like a G. When it's pronounced in Celtic, like Irish, it's pronounced very differently. But generally it's called Imbolc. So it's a sort of silent CG. So having learnt Spanish, it's kind of one of those. But Imbolc is celebrated on the 1st of February. And what we're celebrating is the very first signs of life, the first shoots coming up. And they appear from the ground and we start to see them, the snowdrops, the tiny little bits of life after the very dark of the winter. And as far as the phases of the witch go, the maiden, the mother, the crone, Imbolc is very much celebrating the maiden, celebrating innocence and purity, seeding the dreams, birthing our inner child. All of these things are celebrated as we celebrate Imbolc on the 1st of February. And we had a beautiful celebration. And if any of you came, what did we do on Imbolc? We had all the snowdrops. It was absolutely stunning, but we celebrated new beginnings. And that's very much the start of the year, the first signs of life. And it very much is the maiden, our child phase, our inner child. And then we move through the year into Ostara. So Ostara is celebrated between the 19th and 22nd of March, but generally Ostara is the 20th of March. Now Ostara, spelled O-S-T-A-R-A, very similar to Easter. And that is the celebration of Bridget and new life, and very much represented by eggs and bunny rabbits, the hare. So you can see how these have crossed over into our Christian festivals, into Easter. This really, Easter is supposed to be the rising of Jesus, not Easter eggs and bunny rabbits. But traditionally, for centuries and centuries, we have celebrated that time. And we're celebrating, it's the start of spring. It's the time of when we're celebrating birth and new life. The maiden matures from dark to light, and we explore signs of growth and discernment. It's one of my favorite times. It's what I celebrate as my new year. So there are varying degrees of new year. Some witches celebrate Halloween, Samhain, as new year, and some celebrate Ostara as New Year. I always have, because it's my birthday, so I have my birthday celebration and my New Year celebration all in one go. So Ostara, the spring equinox, is when we're celebrating spring. It's daffodils, it's beautiful. Everything is starting to bloom, and very much associated with the colour of yellow. And all the flowers that you see are yellow flowers, lots of primroses, lots of daffodils. So it's a beautiful time of year, but it's a time when we're looking towards growth and the newness of life and planning projects, when it's that time when we should be in the growth stage where we're birthing things. And very much our Ostara celebration day, we did the 3 cauldrons ritual, and it was all about birthing new things. A beautiful day. And then from Ostara in March, we moved to Beltane. So the 1st of May Day. So we've just had Beltane, and it was a beautiful celebration. And we even left the maypole up for Coven. And we taught you about that, the fact that is it's a fertility celebration. And I'm old enough to remember being at junior school and dancing around the maypole innocently, not realizing it was a fertility ritual. And so it's the celebration of the masculine and the feminine. So we had the maypole to represent Canunos's cock, and we had the lady vagina at the back to represent the feminine. We worked with Canunos and the May Queen, and it's very much that time of fertility, the blooming of nature. And in the phases of the witch, it's the mother, it's the wholesome fertility, the pregnant mother. And it's a fertile time. It's the time when we are giving birth to things, when what we planted at Ostara is coming to fruition. So birthing our ideas, and it's a very powerful, potent time to create magic. I know that on that Beltane celebration day and in the covens afterwards, we did Hieros Gamos magic, and we planted our sunflowers. And we've seen so many pictures of those sunflowers. Mine are huge now. They're actually nearly at the point where they can be put into the garden. They're looking brilliant. So that magic that we planted is growing, is blooming and blossoming into those beautiful sunflowers. So as we're doing that and we're bringing that into covens, that's learning about it. We're learning about the balance and the masculine and feminine of Beltane. And then we move from Beltane at the 1st of May, and we move to the summer solstice. So one of the most celebrated, I think even the BBC News show pictures of people sitting at Stonehenge watching the sun on the summer solstice. And it's a beautiful, magical day. Traditionally, it's called Litha. So it's celebrated between the 19th to the 22nd of June, but in general, the 21st of June. So Litha and the summer solstice celebration, that's the celebration of light. So it's the longest day of the year. We're celebrating the light. We're there fully immersed in the light. Everything is in full bloom. It's a wonderful, wonderful time of year. And this year, we actually are having our Sacred Sisters Rewilding celebration on Litha at the Deer Park. And we're really going to celebrate the light. We're working a lot with fire. We're working a lot with our feminine power, our rewilding. We're celebrating ourselves. And traditionally, the summer solstice is a time of celebration, of partying through the night. Don't need a summer solstice celebration for that, though, do we, ladies? But a beautiful, beautiful celebration. And that's why we're doing such a big event this year, because it's such a wonderful time to spend together. Energetically, it's a very, very powerful time. It's equivalent to a full moon as far as energy is concerned. So we're very much in that, and we will be doing weaving some wonderful magic on that day. But we're celebrating the longest day of the year, the light, the magic of being alive, really. The summer solstice is all of those things. It's a beautiful celebration. And then we move to a great Sabbath. Now this one is spelt Lughnadh. Mm-hmm. And when you look at that, you kind of go, "Oh, Lugnzar," but actually, it's pronounced Lunasar, which doesn't look anything like that when it's written down. But Lunasar is on the 1st of August. And this is really the time we're starting to celebrate the harvest, when the first grain is cut down and celebrated. And it's very much the mother again. It's very much the bounty of the mother. And it's physical sustenance. It's our time when we're in that full flow of reaping the benefits of all the light, of gathering everything in. And it's sort of an overlooked festival, because we go from summer solstice and then we go to Lunasar, and then we move into Mabon. And Mabon really is the harvest festival, the celebration of all those things. But really, the 1st of August is almost, the Lunasar celebration is almost like Imbolc, where it's a celebration of the first harvest, the first signs of the grain, the first signs that we're reaping what we sow. So it's a very gentle energy, but it's a very much an energy of gratitude. So as we move through that time, we're giving thanks, we're giving gratitude, we're humble in that space. It's a quieter celebration, but it's generally a gratitude celebration. So giving thanks for what we've reaped, giving thanks for where we are in our life, giving thanks for the love we have in our life. And you know me and the Love and Light Brigade, but there truly is always something for us to be grateful for. So it's a time where we look for those little signs of things to be grateful for. And then we move from Lunasar and we move into Mabon. So Mabon is celebrated in September, between the 21st and 24th of September. And this really is, this is a time of celebration. This is a time of the Harvest Festival. So I went to a C of E school, and we always celebrated the Harvest Festival with huge, massive loaves that were made into they looked like big bouquets of wheat. And I don't know who used to bake them, but there was always one there. Nobody seemed to eat it, but it was always there. Maybe it was plastic, but I always used to think, wow, look at that. I wonder what that tastes like. I was a greedy little child. But yeah, those huge loaves. So it's the time of Harvest Festival, but it's also the autumn equinox. So in relation to the spring equinox being that quarter celebration, Mabon is that it's the autumn equinox and it's the harvest festival. So this is a time where we're giving thanks for what we're storing, that we're moving into that mindset of starting to think about moving into quieter, liminal, darker spaces. It's when all the squirrels are gathering all the nuts for the harvest. It's where traditionally we would have been pickling and putting things into jars and creating a larder full of food that would sustain us through the winter. So it's very much a bountiful time of celebrating our harvests, but it's also a time of contemplation and a time of self-sufficiency, a time to be in a space of gratitude again. But this is a stronger festival. It's sort of like Lunasar on speed, but it's very much the harvest festival. So I think a lot of us, you can see as we move through these celebrations, these are the Sabbats, these are the wheel of the year that are celebrated by witches all over the world. But you can see how, even particularly in Britain, that these celebrations, like most of us celebrated them when we were children in some form or another, dancing around a maypole, going to our harvest festival, celebrating Christmas and Easter. These celebrations are not something new, but what we've lost is the connection to why they're there and what we would be doing if we were connected to the land, which we're not, are we? We're connected to Lidl and Aldi and maybe Waitrose if you're lucky. But we're not connected to these cycles. We don't live with that anymore. We're not out harvesting grain and planting seed for our survival. So in ancient times, these cycles were essential to life, essential to our life, essential to our survival. But you can see already how there's nothing mysterious about them, is there? We've just lost the traditions of them. We've lost the reverence and the respect for nature. So we don't understand seasonal produce. We don't understand the seasons. So after Mabon, after our harvest festival, after our autumn equinox, we move into one of the, apart from Christmas, I think probably one of the most celebrated, and that is Samhain. So Gemma will seriously bollock me if I call this Halloween. Like, she will not have it. But to the average muggle on the street, Samhain is Halloween, and the 31st of October. So I know some of my witches have a birthday on this day. Jealous much. I am a little. But Samhain, the celebration of Halloween. And really, it's a time to honour the souls of the dead. And it's when the veil between the worlds is thinnest. This is the crone aspect. This is us moving into those dark liminal spaces. And it's one of my favourite times of year. If anybody came here last year, we did an ancestors feast. And we did a big event again at the Deer Park. And that ancestors feast was absolutely beautiful. And we made soul jars. So like when we made spell jars in Coven, and we put beautiful ingredients into a jar, we put all those lovely things into that jar, and we did a spell and we did magic. For Samhain, we did that. We did a soul jar where we honoured one of our relatives, a past ancestor, and we put a picture of them in the jar, and all essences of them in whatever way, pieces of their clothing, any trinkets that we had, and we celebrated them. And then we had a feast, a supper, a wonderful supper feast, and we celebrated our ancestors. And very much that's what the time of Samhain is about. It's one of Gemma, well, it's obviously Gemma's favourite, being a death doula. She loves Halloween. I mean, for both of us, most days are Halloween, aren't they? It's not very often we get out of our black clothes, but it's a wonderful celebration. It's a very magical celebration. And, it's the goths' favourite. We all love Halloween. I tend to go to TK Maxx on Halloween and purchase all the goods for my house to decorate my house. It's a wonderful, beautiful celebration, and it's not scary. And we did talk about this last year at the Coven, and we did talk about it when we did our ancestors' feast, that actually those representations are really sad. That green, ugly version of the witch that is paraded around at Samhain represents the women that were arrested and punished for being witches, when really they were healers and medicine women. And the green represents the bruises of their skin, and the gnarly fingers represent the broken bones where they'd been beaten, and the lack of teeth where they'd been knocked out. And such a sad depiction of magic and witchcraft and the witch that's celebrated on that day. In fact, it's almost more offensive because it's that day, because it's supposed to be a celebration of our magical ancestors. And, we see kids parading around painted green, representing the beaten and bruised woman that's been accused of witchcraft. And so there's a reverence and a sadness to it. But for most of us, I think we all love Halloween. Hey, it's our witchy roots. So, and then we move from Samhain, but not call it Halloween, Samhain, to Yule. And Yule is a beautiful celebration. It's the winter solstice. So it's celebrated between the 20th and the 23rd of December, but usually it's celebrated on the 21st of December. And winter solstice is one of my favourites. I always do something really special with my little sister on winter solstice, and we usually go to some special magical site. And I have done for years, even before I was really practicing in the way that I am now. I always felt a special connection to the winter solstice, to Yule. It's Christmas. Now, my husband was raised very religious, and he knows the Bible inside out. And anytime Christmas is mentioned, he'll tell you Jesus was born in September. because it was so many days after Peter and something else. He's not religious now anymore. He was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, so had a lot of Bible lessons, but he will always, whenever Christmas is mentioned, he will say, that wasn't Jesus's birthday, he was born in September. But literally, when they took over all the pagan festivals and the Christian church took them over, they kept the same festivals, they kept the same dates. It was easier. It was easier for people to transition. So Yule is the winter solstice. It's the celebration of rebirth of the sun. It's the longest night. It's the darkest day. It's when everything is still and asleep and everything is in hibernation. It's very much connected to the crone, as is Samhain, and it's very much a time of liminal space, of quiet darkness, of going within, of exploring ourselves and going within. It's a wonderful time to gather together in celebration, but also in quiet reverence, in our hibernation state. So if anybody came to our beautiful Yule celebration last year, we had the Yule log and we celebrated the story of the Holly King and the Oak King, and it's a beautiful, magical time of year. And traditionally, they would have brought trees in, and evergreen trees that were still green, even though it was December, to celebrate that there was going to be new life, to celebrate the tree of life. They would have lit candles. There would be light everywhere because it was so dark outside. So you can see, the Christmas tree, the Christmas lights. You can see where their roots are. And then we would move through Yule, and then we're back to Imbolc again. So we move through that huge cycle throughout the year, and we move through that every year. And that's our wheel of the year. And always a lovely thing to have on your altar. We've got these at the Academy as well. But this is what we're celebrating. So all those magical days, all those Sabbath days, this is what they are. And in those Sabbath days, Gemma usually brings some very beautiful ancient traditions into that. And I usually bring a lot of the soul work, where we are liminally, or where we are growing, or where we're evolving. So we tend to do our soul work around those cycles of the year as well. So they're beautiful, amazing days, and they really do connect us to nature and to our roots. They're a really important part of our practices as witches, really, of the witchcraft practices. There's a few amazing books. I will put these on the information, but this one is lovely. This is called a spell book for the seasons, and this literally has all of the Sabbaths and magic spells, ideas, recipes. It's also very, very beautiful. It's all like hand painted inside. Very lovely book full of all kinds of beautiful information. And there's another one here called The Witch of the Forest's Guide to Earth Magic. So again, that's a beautiful one, and it focuses very much on the seasons of the year. That's by Lindsay Squire. So I have put these on the information, but they're very beautiful, very full of images, full of beautiful spells, incantations, celebrations, all the things we can do to celebrate the Wheel of the Year. So they're beautiful books. And then within the Wheel of the Year, we have smaller cycles. So I've been waffling on for so long, I didn't realise it was going to. I thought, this isn't going to be very long. Well, I should have known better, shouldn't I? Because it's me. So the smaller cycles. Now, the moon is very, very important to many of us. And moon magic. So I've got some wonderful cards here. Now, this is actually from the works. So they do these little boxes. I think they used to be £5. They're probably not now, but they're not very expensive. They do a chakra one. They do loads of different ones. And they do one that's moon magic. And it even comes with a set of cards. And actually, these little books and these little cards, I still have the chakra ones. I use them for all my Reiki training. This moon magic book is really quite cool. And it goes into all the practices of the moon and the cycles of the moon. But it also goes into our moon sign. So our sun and moon signs in astrology, what are they? Do you know yours? I know mine. I'm a Pisces sun and a Scorpio moon. Explains a lot, doesn't it? But the moon phases and moon magic, pretty much when we're doing magic, we're very often working with the phases of the moon. And we would like to do that a lot more. However, how the covens fall, it's usually very difficult because they're over 2 weeks. So we're having different moon phases. So we tend to do magic that works with the moon phases, all the moon phases. But the moon phases are very important. And the moon, we are so intrinsically linked to the moon, to the ebb and flow, to the cycles of the moon. As women, 28-day cycles, the moon has 28-day cycles. The moon itself represented as a goddess. And so moon magic and working with the cycles of the moon is really, really powerful. And probably if you've managed to stay listening to this till now, you are hoping for the bit about the moon, and it's probably a little bit more juicy than the part about the Sabbats of the year. So the moon phases. The moon is the feminine. And we know that we contain so much water, and water is affected by the moon, the magnetic pull of the moon. The word lunatic literally means moon crazy. And that's a very ancient word. So it was recognized many, many years ago that people were affected by the moon. And I know so many of you sensitive empath ladies struggle to sleep at the full moon. The moon really affects me. So I'm 9 planets in water out of 12 in my astrology chart. So I seem to be deeply affected by the moon, and I have many friends who are also. I think to some degree, we all tend to feel the pull of the moon. And so we probably feel that more keenly and more acutely than we do with the sun, because the sun is a larger cycle, it's a more gradual, whereas the moon is quite abrupt. And as I mentioned before, Lisa Lister in her work covers a lot about the moon cycles and our cycles as women, and how we move through those cycles of the moon, whether we're bleeding or not. We are different archetypes. It affects us in different ways. So most of us are those people, oh, the moon. Unfortunately, we seem to have a lot of cloud cover, and we don't seem to see a lot of the moon these days, do we? But the phases of the moon, the luminosity of the moon has fascinated us, and we've celebrated it for many, many centuries. And as we use the moon in witchcraft, we would do different magic depending on the cycles of the moon. So as the moon moves through its phases, we would do either invoking magic, where we're drawing things to us, where we're bringing things in, where we're calling for things, where we're creating things and birthing things. And then we would also do banishing magic, where we're letting things go, where we're expelling things, removing things. And if we work with that magic in the cycles of the moon, and we work with the cycles of the year, really powerful. But with the moon, we can literally pull on those forces, whether they're ebbing and flowing and which cycle they're in, to really positively impact our magic, to ramp it up a stage. So the phases of the moon. Now, we all know the full moon, and we all know maybe the new moon, the dark moon, where there is hardly any moon. But there are varying stages that the moon goes through. So it waxes when it's growing full, and it's growing fat, and it's moving towards full. And then it wanes when it's going from full back to new. So there's the waxing and the full moon and the waning. But the waxing and the waning are also split into different categories. So we start the moon, it's a new moon, it's a tiny little thin crescent, and then it starts to grow a little bit bigger. And we start to see that crescent quite defined. Now that's the waxing crescent moon. And so for the first week, it's the waxing crescent moon. And then it starts to move from being between new and waxing, so it's half a little crescent. Then it moves into waxing gibbous. This is a lovely word. It's a bit like the Widdershins word. So waxing gibbous. So that means it's fully waxing. It's in its full waxing phase. And that's the phase between when it's half to full. So you have the first quarter of the moon where it's a waxing crescent. Then it moves into waxing gibbous. So that's the moon when it's nearly full, when it's moving from that crescent into the full stage. And then it's a full moon, and a full moon isn't just one night usually. The energy of a full moon can last for 3 days. So the day before, the day of the full moon, and the day after. And there are quite a few amazing moon apps that you can track the cycles of the moon and what planets the moon is in, what signs the moon is in. So the full moon that we had last night was in Sagittarius. So we tend to feel these more keenly if we're affected by those planets. So you can really go into so much depth with the moon. So we get to the full moon, And then the moon starts to wane, starts to go back to a new moon. So then we're in waning gibbous when it's still quite full, but it's getting smaller. And then we go to the waning crescent where there's just that little bit left. And then we go into the dark moon. So there is a day in a month that's the dark moon, where literally we're out of that cycle of the moon and we're just coming into the new cycle, but we're not quite into the new moon. That dark moon day, we would never normally practice magic. So that dark moon day is kind of equivalent to Yule. It's the death phase. We're in that space of complete liminality. We're in the death. So we don't tend to cast magic on those days. But the other cycles of the moon we use wholeheartedly. So I have detailed all of these in the notes. So the waxing crescent moon, that first between new moon up to sort of halfway to the new moon, the waxing crescent moon, that phase, this phase is all constructive, moving up to the full moon. So this is increasing things, fresh beginnings, bringing new thing in, sowing seeds, new ventures. It's the best time to focus and set your intentions for the positive income. Positive income? There's a Freudian slip, definitely for positive income, but for positive outcome too. So it's that setting the intentions phase of the moon, calling things in. And then we move into that waxing crescent moon, where it's between nearly half to full. So it's going through that phase, and it's a much bigger, fatter, juicier moon. So we're really into that waxing energy, into that growing towards the full moon energy. And so again, this is all about bringing things in, positive things, calling things in, doing our powerful magic to bring in what we want, manifestation magic. So it's all about bringing it in the first 2 weeks of the moon. It's all about us growing things and birthing things. And then we come to the full moon. So a full moon is a magical moon. You can do any magic on a full moon. You can release things that no longer serve you and harness that power so the magic that we did at Beltane, the Hieros Gamos magic, where we let things go and brought things in, that would be a beautiful magic to do on a full moon, because you have the full balance, it's there in all its glory. So we can let things go and bring things in. But it's the most powerful time to do any magic, whatever magic that is. And I always think that 2-part magic, where we're doing banishing and invoking for a full moon, is a beautiful way to do that. It's very helpful when we're doing spell work to let go of things, because we create space. And there's a reason why sacrifice has come up in magic for many, many centuries. And I'm not talking about sacrificing animals or people, but actually giving up something or letting something go to make space for something new to come in. So that's a beautiful way to use full moon magic. And then we go into our waning energy as the moon then is closing. It's moving back towards the dark moon. And the waning magic is a time to let go of negative thoughts, banishing magic, removing things, taking things away from our life. It's the endings, time to decrease. It's also a time to look at our shadows, our shadow aspect. It's a very good time for doing shadow work with ourselves, for working with magic in our emotions. So it's a really wonderful time to let things go. And then we move into that very last quarter, that waxing crescent moon, that waning crescent moon. And the waning crescent moon is really the time of death, of the letting go of the old. So if there's an ex hanging around that we really want to get rid of, then we'd be waiting for the waning crescent moon, because that's a much more powerful energy of banishing. So that last part of the moon, as it's just about to close, that's when we really let go of stuff, when we do all our banishing magic. And then we're into that very small window, usually only a day. And the apps will really tell you accurately with this, the dark moon phase, this dark moon, this day when we don't do magic, where we don't practice magic. So we move into that phase. So we don't cast magic on that day. So as we move through all these cycles and phases, we can really use the moon in powerful ways in our magic, whether we're invoking or banishing. And it really is a very powerful way of using the moon. So hopefully that gives you a much better understanding of why we work with the wheel of the year and why we work with the phases of the moon, and why we do moon magic. Now, I want to just touch on the astrology side. So I'm not an astrologist. However, one of the most powerful discoveries for me was when I had my full birth chart, and I had that at 21. And I was always quite into that stuff, and I knew I was a Pisces, and I knew I was quite sensitive and all the rest of it. But when I had this full birth chart, it revealed things in my past, in my life history. And as I read through that, it was astounding how accurate it was. And I'm going to share a little bit, but I was sexually abused as a child. And that's actually in my birth chart. Difficult, abusive relationships with fathers, brothers, like it reoccurs. There is so much water, there's so much feeling and emotion. And there's so many things that were confirmed to me. So when I first had that birth chart done, it was like, oh, wow, this stuff actually means something. But I didn't really understand why. And the reason why these things are all important, the reason why the sun and the moon and our birth charts and where the planets sit, the reason why that's important is because we're energy. And everything within the universe is energy. And really, it's vibration, but it's also magnetism. So vibration really works like magnetism. If you imagine two magnets, things are drawn or they're repelled. And that's very much the same with us as human beings. We're energy and we're very affected by it. We've just talked about being affected by the moon. We're affected by the sun. I mean, God, we had some lovely weather, didn't we? 2 days of it. We had a 2-day summer. How much better do we feel? I used to live in Spain. My God, it's constantly sunny. And yes, I felt massively better than I do when I look outside and it's raining and drizzling. But we're affected by the light of the sun. So we're affected by planets. Many of us follow the sort of ascension things that are happening, the shift into 5D. And it doesn't matter if you don't know what that is, but it's basically the energies of the planet are changing. And there is a machine called the Schumann resonance machine. And that Schumann resonance machine measures the energy of the Earth in hertz, just like vibration is measured. So it measures the energy of the Earth and it tracks the energy of the Earth. And the energy of the Earth is directly affected by what's happening with the sun and the moon, but also with other planets. And so are we. So over the years of delving deeper down all these healing modalities and spiritual practices, in some ways they've all come together. Nothing is separate. So when we're looking at the phases of the year and the cycles of the moon, to understand our own cycles and how those affect us personally, it's really, really helpful to get our full birth chart. So there is a website called Cafe Astrology. I think I'll put the link in the information that I send with this, and you can get a free full birth chart that tells you where all the placements are, all your 12 planets, and what that means for you, what that means about your personality, what it means about your strengths and your gifts, even what it means about your life purpose, why you're here, what your soul is trying to achieve, why it's here. And it's so amazingly insightful. And where our sun sign, so our sun sign is our usual star sign. When people say, oh, what sign are you? They mean our sun sign, our main sign. But there are so many, there are at least 12, and there are other subcategories. But there are 12 planets that affect us. And our sun sign, most of us know, even your dad probably knows what his sun sign is. But when we start to delve a little bit deeper, our sun sign is kind of the personality that we present to the world. Our moon sign is our truest nature, and often our shadow side and the side that we tend to hide. And there are so many gifts in that shadow side. So I would highly recommend that as we're looking at all these cycles and these phases, that it's a very good idea to get your full birth chart and actually see at least where your sun and your moon and your ascendant, your rising sign is. Because even those 3 signs will give you really amazing insight into your personality. And as we talked about last time, the more we can learn about ourselves and who we truly are and what makes us tick, the more we can love and accept ourselves, the less we compare ourselves to others. So even bringing that into this, the planets affect everything. They affect the seasons, they affect The cycles of the moon affect us as women because we're cyclical beings. But all of the planets in the whole of the universe and beyond affect us. And this is why our birth chart can be so powerful. So having a look at your sun and your moon and your ascendant, your rising sign can be really powerful. I'm more water, as I say, and I've got a lot of Pisces. I've got 6 Pisces placements. So by all accounts, I should be unicorns and rainbows and, oh, hello, everyone. And as you know, I'm not, am I? There's that little edge. Well, that little edge is my Scorpio moon, which I wouldn't be surprised if many of you have a Scorpio moon or some Scorpio, because Scorpio is the sign of witchcraft. And a Scorpio moon, it is a very powerful, but a very dark, and I don't mean dark in a negative sense. I mean in a shadow sense. So this is why I do shadow work. This is why I'm very comfortable in those darker realms. But I used to really disconnect from that part of myself. And actually, when I had that birth chart done, the lady who did it got very emotional. And she said, I'm not sure how you're doing life with all this sensitivity. You've got 9 planets in water. And then she went, oh, hold on a minute. Your moon's in Scorpio. That's how you're doing it, because there's all that power and magic and strength in there. And actually delving into that, into my birth chart and into where the planets sit for me has been really enlightening. I'd probably go as far, if it's not too cheesy, to say life-changing, because it was a real understanding of me. And so I'd highly recommend you do that. Cafe Astrology. And they're free. You can print it off. It's about 12 pages long. So it will tell you where your planets sit and how they affect you. And then it will tell you what that means. And it's a little bit general because it's a computer generated program. But actually seeing somebody or looking into that birth chart is a very, very helpful thing to do, because it's not just the sun and the moon that affect us. It's all of the planets and where they sit. So I would highly recommend that you do that and have a look. I think we're going to cover that in Covens over the, we did do our birth charts briefly, but I think we're going to look at that in a lot more detail, because the one thing that we really want for you and that we really are passionate about at the Wild Women's Academy is helping you to love and accept yourself, to see your own magic. If there's one thing I could do for all of you ladies, it would be to help you find your own magic, to be able to see the wonder and the beauty and the uniqueness that is you and how wonderful that is. And it's a sad world. We live in a world that's full of clones and everyone looks the same and everyone dresses the same. And it's sort of, it always has been that way, I guess. There's always been trends. But there's nothing more beautiful than that person that stands out because of their uniqueness. And actually, when we see that person that doesn't mind being themselves, that's openly and abandonedly themselves, it kind of gives us permission to be ourselves too, doesn't it? So yes, it's wonderful to learn about these cycles and to reconnect with nature. And you know that I spend a lot of time sitting under a tree with Harold. And I didn't always do that. But when I started to do that, I started to notice when everything blooms, when everything dies away, what flowers are there, what insects are there, what life is present through that cycle. And I think before that, when I was in the corporate world and I was rushing from one place to another, I was so disconnected from nature. And it used to be that our food was connected because we would eat what was seasonal, what was growing. And so we would be connected to nature in that way. But now we're not. We're eating root vegetables all year. We're eating salad all year. We're not seasonal in that sense. So as a race, as human beings, we've lost touch with these very, very important cycles, the macro cycles and the micro cycles of our life and of our journey of life. And it's all about the youth, isn't it? We don't celebrate the wisdom. We don't celebrate the crone and the wisdom. We don't do that. In other cultures, they do. They revere their elderly. They know they're wise. We don't do that in our culture. And that's such a shame because there's so much wisdom. So these cycles are so much bigger. They're the cycles of us as we move through life. They're the cycles of life and death. And really, that's what they are. The moon when it's growing, when it's waning and waxing, life and death. The sun, the cycles of the year. Even a day, it's light and it's dark. So we're always in cycles, and the more we can connect and work with those cycles, the better. I'm just going to end by saying, so I used to work with a lady who did everything by the cycles of the moon. She ran a business. She was a self-employed entrepreneur, and she was very successful. And I was trying to book a meeting with her one day, and she went, "Oh no, I can't do that week. No, I'm not in the cycle that week. That's not my week. It has to be the second week of the month." I was like, okay. Oh, obviously she has something on the other weeks that's, runs every month. Oh, can it not be this month? No, it has to be that month because I know as a woman, that's my dynamic month. That's my dynamic week in the month. That's the month I want to get things done. That's the week I want to get things done. That's the week when I feel confident and bolshy and amazing. That week after, I'm coming up to my bleed and I'm very emotional and bloated. I like to be working at home that week. And I'm not going to lie, I thought, oh God, for God's sake, how you can run your life like that? When I was so closed off and shut down and repressed. And how she ran her life like that was very simple because she just mapped her own cycles. She knew where she was. She knew herself. She knew that the week before her period wasn't the time to be having big dynamic meetings where she's putting it out there. She understood herself and her own cycles, and she used those to her advantage. She used those to become more and more successful. And she wasn't constantly pushing against everything. It didn't feel like a struggle because she was working in the flow of her own cycles. So finding out who you are, having your birth chart, connecting to nature, connecting to your own cycles, looking at how you feel, maybe even mapping your cycles through a month and noticing if there's a pattern. Are you the same? Do you have patterns through the month? Are there times when you could be doing things that would make things so much easier? I've started doing this and oh my God, yes, there are. The first 2 weeks when we have all our Coven groups are when I'm very much in my liminal state, my bloated, bleeding state, where I usually want to be hiding in bed. I didn't plan that particularly well, did I? And then this week of my month is when I'm more scatty and I need to be focusing. It's my admin week. It's when I'm doing all my sort of getting things done, processing and admin. So I would definitely look into that as well. She talks about it quite a lot in Self Sorcery, Lisa Lister, and she talks about it in Love Your Lady Landscape. But there are many, many women working with the cycles of the moon and actually running their lives and businesses with the cycles of the moon very successfully. So have a look at your birth chart, look at the seasons, look at the moon cycles, work with the moon cycles, and follow your own cycle. Keep a diary for the next 3 months of how you are in your cycle, in a monthly cycle, in the moon phases. See how you're bearing and what you notice about your own moods and your own feelings, and see if that works for you, because it certainly has for me. And maybe if I hadn't discounted that 15 years ago, I'd probably have had a much easier time for the last 15 years instead of struggling. Unfortunately, this world says we have to turn up and be the same every single day, and it expects us to be consistently the same. And as women, we definitely aren't, but even men are affected by cycles and flows. So as human beings, we're not always the same. It's a very big ask. And it's why so many of us struggle in this world. So don't feel bad if you struggle to keep up with that daily grind and be the same and turn up every day. This is one of the reasons I'm self-employed, because I couldn't do that. I had a very high-powered job, and they mapped this once when I worked for a company who did value me. They were like, every 6 weeks you're off sick. I'm like, yeah, that's about as much as I can manage before my body goes into shutdown. Highly sensitive, highly empathic. My body just gets affected. And about every 6 weeks, I have a week off with a migraine. And so they ended up shifting things around for me so that didn't happen. And I'm pleased to say that since I've been self-employed and since I control my own diary and my own life, I don't suffer with those bouts of sickness anymore. So our cycles are really important, and we've lost touch with them as a society, as a world. So it's really important that we reconnect with them. So enjoy reconnecting with your cycles. Enjoy practicing and experimenting with the magic cycles of the moon. If you would like tickets for our massive summer solstice celebration, our Litha celebration on the 22nd of June, please do let me know. We have got a few tickets left. We are wearing red. We are going all out, wild woman passion. So please let us know. It's been absolutely lovely to talk to you again. There you go, number 2 down now. Managed to succeed with 2. And I will drop this recording to everyone. There's no point telling you that, is there? Because you'll be watching it at the end and you'll already have had the recording. But love you all, ladies. I will see you at Coven the week after next, and we can't wait to see you there. We're looking at the power of 3 this time, and we're working with some amazing cards. We're really focusing on card readings. We're working with the voice of the soul cards. So the power of 3 and the voice of the soul cards. So we can't wait to see you at Coven. Thank you so much for listening to me. Just drop me a message and let me know if you would like all the accompanying information that goes with this to put in your little files, and any questions. And I will see you all soon. Bye bye.